Welcome to Lesson 10 of Unit B.2. My name is Daniel Ondisi, and I'm a science teacher who uses OpenSciEd in my classroom. In Lesson 10, we have students investigate 4 case studies of successful fire management: prescribed burning, cultural burning, restoring grazers, and replanting forests. Let's get started by looking back at how we arrived at this point in our unit. During Lesson 9, our students modeled how carbon dioxide from burning carbon sinks creates a positive feedback loop that increases global temperatures. In this lesson, the focus shifts as we wonder how we can manage carbon sinks to disrupt this feedback loop and reduce large wildfires. We'll be using the Lesson 9 consensus model, which highlights these feedback effects as a visual anchor to start our next step. Let's look at how the lesson is structured overall, which is an investigation lesson that takes roughly 3 days. There is only about 10 minutes of prep time, and while it does not involve a hands-on lab investigation, it does require devices so students can view videos and interact with Wildlife Risk Tool. We also have access to some related videos, specifically the Jean Dacqui cultural burning video and some prescribed burn drone footage. Lesson 10 is made up of 3 sense-making loops, which we will explore more right now in greater detail. For our first loop, students read case studies of successful wildfire management, including prescribed burns, grazing, cultural burns, and tree planting, and they share those findings in a jigsaw with other groups. They figure out that managing carbon sinks through these techniques reduces the overabundance of buildup fuel or removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which disrupts the positive feedback loop. This leads them to wonder how these management techniques actually change the flow of energy and matter in a specific ecosystem. I found this to be important because it shifts our unit from the doom and gloom of climate change into actionable, hopeful solutions. In the second sense-making loop, students recall the components of the Serengeti ecosystem. They read about fire management there, and they use a mathematical representation to model energy and matter flow through that food web. We figure out that energy and matter transfer is highly inefficient, with only a small fraction transferred to the consumers, and that management techniques like grazing and burning reduce the amount of plant biomass or fuel available for wildfires. This causes us to consider how the benefits of these fires and how we can implement these techniques locally. This provides mathematical and concrete ecological evidence for why these solutions work. In the third loop, what students discuss is the value of sharing knowledge from multiple cultures, specifically focusing on indigenous knowledge while investigating fire risk in a local community using a web tool and planning to gather input from community members. We discover that fire management decisions must account for historical context, diverse knowledge holders, and vulnerable human populations in order to successfully reduce local risk. This leaves them to think about how we design a specific fire management solution for our community. This also helps to ground our global ecological concepts in students' own lived realities. To summarize Lesson 10, we want students to see that prescribed burns, cultural burns, and grazing reduce the overabundance of buildup energy and matter, which acts as fuel. They should also conclude that planting trees removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, that energy and matter flow inefficiently through food webs, and that fire management decisions carry profound social and ecological consequences. Let's talk about a few key moments in this lesson that are of most importance instructionally and for your facilitation. In parts 2 and 3, students are grouped together to read through different case studies, talk through the text, and use colored markers to actively update their carbon cycle diagrams. Groups will be collaborating over papers, explicitly tracing how human management alters carbon movement. And this matters because it allows students to apply the global carbon cycle model from Lesson 9 to specific actionable management techniques. Our key takeaway is that different strategies alter the system differently, either by reducing fuel size or sequestering carbon dioxide. When I teach this, I make sure to circulate and check that students are using scientific reasoning to link evidence from their text to their revised model, prompting them to label exactly where the carbon and energy are going. Moving into part 8, students look closely at the simplified food web diagram of the Serengeti, tracing the specific biomass percentages transferred between producers, herbivores, and carnivores. They should be using calculators and writing down ratios to calculate the steep drops in energy at each level. This step shifts students from qualitatively describing to quantitatively collecting evidence to show energy flow. They take away that large amounts of energy and matter are lost as heat or waste at each trophic level, meaning that reducing producers effectively starves a potential fire of fuel. I usually challenge my students to mathematically calculate the cumulative proportion of energy from producers that makes it all the way to the carnivores, and I push them to identify what physical form the carbon is in at each of those levels. In part 12, the class transitions into a reflective discussion centered around a conceptual diagram contrasting different human relationships with nature. You will hear students discussing how historical government policies ban traditional burning practices and how modern collaborations are changing that dynamic. This is important because it explicitly addresses power, historicity, and how differing worldviews impact ecological management. The core takeaway is that collaborations between indigenous groups and government agencies respect traditional knowledge and help heal both the land and people. While facilitating this, I try to make it a point to acknowledge the specific history of the land that our school sits on. And I walk students through the apart from versus a part of nature culture relationship diagram to show how a mindset of reciprocity improves fire management. During part 13, students open up their laptops and interact with an online map tool, entering local zip codes to look at color coded wildfire hazard zones and overlaying that with demographic data. It is a striking moment when they see that their own neighborhoods and streets on the screen. This connects abstract management concepts directly to students' own lived experiences and realities and helps them identify vulnerable human populations. They learn that a successful fire management plan must account for specific local fuels and social vulnerabilities. I always do a live demonstration of the wildfire risk tool using the area around our school to orient them. During the share out, I ask probing questions about whose perspectives are missing from the data and how specific vulnerable groups might be protected. At this point, they're wondering how to apply what they figured out to protect the places they care about. In lesson 11, we'll break down criteria and constraints to design the actual fire management systems for our communities. Let's talk about some practical classroom tested tips and tricks to help manage differentiation and logistics more smoothly. When assigning the 4 case study texts, I highly recommend giving students different entry points to keep the science accessible for everyone. Instead of handing every student the exact same text-heavy task, we can remove a lot of those initial friction points by offering varied ways to engage with the information. I found that the cultural burn text is short, but conceptually rich and pairs directly with a companion video, which this works well for students who benefit from seeing a practice in action to process what they are reading. The tree planting text is usually very approachable because kids already bring a lot of prior knowledge about forests to the table, making it a great option for students who are still working on their reading confidence. On the other hand, the prescribed burn text is the longest and most technical, but it uses clear subheadings and features drone footage to help them visualize the spatial layout of the burn. By offering these options, we let students engage through different modalities, visuals, video, and text, and allows for choices based on interest or reading readiness. This ensures everyone can contribute meaningfully to their jigsaw groups without getting stuck behind a literacy barrier. To manage the jigsaw sharing in part 3 efficiently, one thing that helps me is making sure the groups reading about prescribed burns and cultural burns have a device ready to view the mandatory videos. Something else that works well is using a strict 3-minute timed rotation while they share. This gives every representative equal time to explain exactly how their technique alters the model from lesson 9, which matches up perfectly with the group sharing instructions shown on the slides for the lesson. Because this lesson brings in the Serengeti, it draws heavily on ecological concepts that students built back in Unit B1. If your students didn't complete Unit B1, I found you'll need to give them a brief primer on basic food webs, specifically producers, primary and secondary consumers, and decomposers, before they are able to dig into the mathematical model of this lesson. If the Serengeti context feels too far removed for your kids, something that has worked for me is swapping it out for something like the American prairie, and you can use bison instead of wildebeest. Here are the terms students will add to their personal glossaries. The specific terms they encounter and add are biomass and food web. I like to have them add these definitions as they naturally come up during the Serengeti food web mathematical modeling. Managing all the classroom charts can be a bit detailed, so this helps keep the posters organized. We will want to bring back the related phenomenon poster from Lesson 1, the driving question board, and the Lesson 9 consensus model. I create and keep a Wonderings chart on day 1, and I save that for day 3, while the small group revised case study models can just be created and discarded once they're done. Make sure you save your FIRE's progress tracker and your driving question board for future lessons. In Lesson 11, we'll be transitioning to having students actually design fire management systems for communities they care about. Thank you for preparing to teach Lesson 10 and for doing the thoughtful work it takes to guide through students through these lessons. Have fun, and you got this.